This is an interview with M. H. Bratcher. He was born April 4, 1879, 4 miles west of Nashville, Tennessee. His family moved to Texas when he was 2 and came to Ardmore when he was 12. He now lives at 123 B Street Northwest. We are taking this interview at his home. The date is February 27, 1956. Now, Mr. Bratcher, would you tell us about your trip up from Texas? Well, tell us. Just go ahead.
Well, we brought about 25 or 30 young mules, 30 I believe, and about 60 head of cattle. Drove them through the land. Was 8 days on the road coming from Cleveland, Texas to Ardmore. Had to cross the Red River on a ferry boat. And we was there, nearly almost 1 day of getting across. And we drove on then to Ardmore. And my father had this place out west of town, rice lease. And we're taking our stock out there and then fixed us a place to live, started our ranch.
Isn't that called Prairie Valley now? Isn't that called Prairie Valley now?
Yes, it's Prairie Valley now, known as Prairie Valley.
What about this grass you leased out there?
Well, we kept that a good while. And then when the Indians went to allotting their land, the government began to give them their land, but then Mr. Buckles, he was part Indian, and he got our grassland, known as the Buckles Hills now. And he got our grassland, and we had to make arrangements then for more grass. But we couldn't get enough grass to keep the stock that we had. Had too much stock at that time and had to let part of them go.
Okay. Now tell me about the asphalt mine you had out in town.
I'll tell you. Then a company come in from St. Louis, I believe it was, and wanted to start an asphalt mine on our place. Well, my dad let them have the land and leased them the asphalt for so much royalty out of the asphalt. And they put in about $25,000 or $30,000 worth of machinery. Started to operate. And they operated a good while. Then the asphalt changed, and they couldn't use it on the road that there's a building. And they finally shut this big mine down and moved all the machinery away. Just they had to set $50,000 or $75,000 worth of machinery down. And then they quit. This big bunch did. Then another smaller outfit come in and opened a mine at another place. It was on my land at that time. And I leased it to them. And they operated it a good while. And they got to where they couldn't make any money out of that, and they let it go. And now there isn't any mine out there at all. Mine all right, but they're not operating.
Well, didn't you have a mine of your own that you what you ran?
Yeah. And then I got another place, and I sold this asphalt to some Oklahoma City folks And they operated the mine 2 or 3 years, and they quit operating. And then I got some oil companies interested in an oil well and drilled an oil well on the place out there. And oil was just 15 cents a barrel. Pete Shaner, a good friend of mine and a good oil man, drilled the well for me. And oil was cheap then, just 15 cents a barrel. And when he went to pull his casing, his 5-inch casing out of the well, he pulled it in two about middle ways, and the hole was 3,800 feet, I believe it was. And he was broke, and I didn't have any money either. I'd spent mine with him, drilling this well. And so the well just, the half of that 5-inch casing was left in there. Yeah. Then another company come along, and they leased the land up then, and drilled Mr. Buckles, that drilled wells all over his place, just got one well. And now then, out there, the oil business don't seem to pick up any, while they have come back out there and leased all the land out there again to drill another well.
Well, do you remember much about Ardmore at that time? Would you tell us about some of the buildings that were here and maybe the streets?
Well, when I first come here from Texas, Ardmore wasn't any business of any kind much here. It wasn't a very big town. Not any larger than Lone Grove, if that large. And I've seen it built from that to about 27,000 people here now. It seems like there's more than that the way they've built them all here at Ardmore. And here where the Gilbert building is now, I've seen about 25 yoke of oxen back in the ox days parked there when I first come to this country.
Do you remember when the railroad came in here? When did the
railroad had just been here 3 months when I come to this country. And I was going to school when I was a kid down in the little old street called A Street. Fine little old boys were going there. We all thought he was a fine little boy. His name was Morris. He wore a pistol to school one day, and the teacher called in a couple of the school board members to do something about it. The boy wouldn't give the pistol up. This boy run on the little old back porch to the house. It's just a little dwelling house. And this boy run on the back porch, shot 2 holes through the floor and run and left. And had been gone 25 years or longer. And he wrote his parents a letter that he was tired of living. He'd never wrote him at all, or had never heard from him. They told him he was tired of living, and he was committing suicide, and he was on the porch of the Methodist Church in Chicago. He had left this letter from to send to his father, back to his father, and they sent it here to his father.
That's tragic.
And let's see.
Tell me about the horse races you ran up down Main Street here.
And when I was a boy, come to this country, lots of folks here in town was in the horse and buggy days, and they'd get us boys to run horse races up and down Main Street now. And there was 2 wells down on where Main Street is now. Always 15 or 20 hogs laying around them wells. Well, these fellas would go to these wells to see if the hogs didn't get up on in front of us, and then we'd run our horse races.
Did this happen very often?
Well, I've run several races up there back in them days, and then they finally got shed of the hog, got some kind of ordinance passed, and they had to put the hogs up.
Now, Mr. Bratcher, would you tell me about some of the crime you witnessed around here?
Yes, I'll tell you about a few of them.
I'll give you a little time to think.
There's a man out at the City Lake at that time had a bunch of cattle, and he wore a gun all the time. He come into town, and there's 2 Indians there called themselves Indian policemen, and one of them taking the gun off of him. And he asked him if he was going to give it back to him. He said no. The man went home. He told him he'd give it back to him the next day. The man went home and come back the next day with a .38 Winchester on his saddle. He asked this Indian, right along about on the east side of Bill Owens, just right along there in a little old shack along there then. He asked this Indian to give him his gun, and he said, "You go to hell." Mr. Zumwalt said, "You're going a lot quicker than me." Reached and got his Winchester, shot this Indian in the back as he walked off, killed him dead. And the boy that was in the little joint, the man at work in there doing something, this bullet went through the engine and knocked a big splinter in his neck, the back of his neck there.
This joint was a wooden building?
Yeah. Knocked a big splinter in his back of his neck. And he ran out and said, "Get him to a doctor quick, that he's shot in the neck." And the man told him, he said, "Now you just get quiet." He said, "I don't think you're too bad shot, but you're pretty bad." Then reached up and pulled out the big splinter out of his neck and told him, said, "Here's the bullet." Well, this old boy that thought he shot through the neck was about the happiest boy I've ever saw in Oregon.
I would be too if I found out I wasn't shot.
Yeah, he was about the happiest boy I've ever seen in Oregon.
Wasn't there a shooting up here on B Street? A few houses up? Tell me about that.
Well, there was an officer killed another officer about the 3rd house on the east side of the street there. And I don't think there's ever anything much done about it.
Well, do you know why he shot him?
Well, I think one of them had the other one's gun. Wouldn't give it back to him.
Oh.
I think that was the trouble.
Were there many thefts around here before statehood?
Yes, it was awful bad. I'll tell you about it.
Just go ahead and tell me.
The oil companies, asphalt companies, built a nice church house out there at Prairie Valley, and going to let them use it for a school. At that time, there wasn't any school in this country, any schoolhouse out in the country anywhere. And they was going to let them use it for a schoolhouse. And
I'll give you a little time to think.
And they got to having church out there. And my dad built a big arbor. And had a big meeting going, you know. There's a meadow there, 80-acre meadow. This was beside it. And one night, me and some old boys counted 65 buggies and wagons out on that meadow. Something that'd be quite a sight to see now.
I bet with all the cars now, you don't see many horse and buggy.
Never seen.
What about the law enforcement before statehood?
Wasn't any law enforcement on the United States Marshals here, and they couldn't do much about it.
Well, did you did you notice any change after statehood?
Oh yes. They got sheriffs, you know, deputy sheriffs, policemen for the town and everything. It's quite a bit of difference.
What recreation did y'all have back in those days? And what did you do in your free time?
Well, there's lots of quails here then. We'd hunt, go squirrel hunting, lots of wolves. People had lots of hounds here then. We run wolves. Oh, everything.
I think they called it courting then, but it's called dating now. How did you go on a date then?
Horseback.
And maybe in buggies?
Buggy, horseback or buggy.
And I bet you that was a lot of fun then. I mean,
More fun than it is now.
I don't know if I could get along in a horse and buggy. Since I have a car, I never have driven a horse.
Yeah. You have? How did you ever ride a horse?
I've ridden one.
So you rode a little?
Mm-hmm. You said you were a car salesman and a real estate man sometime back.
Yes, I started selling cars. The Ford car. These were selling to Hale. And then I got to selling cars for Tom Cooper. Which I worked for him a good while in the car business. And I went down and sold Studebakers for Harry Moyer. And we made 2 trips to South Bend, Indiana, and bring back 2 cars apiece. There's 2 of us went first on the train, me and Melvin Colston, and we had such good luck. When we got back, why, Mr. Moyer sent 5 of us. We all went in one car, and we brought back 9 new cars that trip. Never had any bad luck at all.
Do you remember the first car you saw in Ardmore? I mean, did it scare any horses that you remember?
Well, the first as I seen was Fords. I bought the second Ford that was sold here.
That's interesting, Mr. Bratcher. This has been an interview with M.H. Bratcher by Roger Blount, a senior in Ardmore High School in 1956.
Barbara had a store, but it was earthquake is there, and my sister was living there in San Francisco.
Was sold here.
That's interesting, Mr. Bratcher. This has been an interview with M.H. Bratcher by Roger Blount, a senior in Ardmore High School in 1956.
Father. East Main Street, that's where it is, East Main.
Do you remember the railroad that you came in on? The train you came in on? How was it?
No, I didn't come in a Pullman. My husband, I told you about him having a horse, and he,
Go ahead and tell.
but he had a horse down there, and it was a beautiful thing, and he hated to give him up. So he got a whole bucket, whole car, you know.
A railroad car?
Yeah, and brought him up here and bought our household thing, and brought that horse up here.
Was this a riding horse?
Yeah, all the prettiest thing you ever saw. And then after we were here a good while, we bought a car and sold this horse. Dan Patch was his name, named after that noted horse, you know, Dan Patch. You don't remember that?
I don't remember.
Well, I do. Dan Patch, that's where the name came from.
Do you remember the first car you saw?
Yeah, one that took my mother.
Would you tell the folks about that?
It's a funny looking old thing. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah. Back around statehood, how did you cope with the illness and the sickness?